Okay, so for today's tutorial, I will be demonstrating how to knit German short rows for toe-up socks. Here you can see the German short rows have a very rounded look for the toe, and here's how it looks from the side. So just to warn you, German short rows do have the tendency to look a little holy, so that is kind of a risky run when you do make German short rows for toes or heels, but anyways, this is how it looks. And before I get into showing you the actual knitting, I will be going over a little bit of the math so that if you are not following a sock pattern, you understand how many stitches you will need for your sock. And in case you're wondering, this is the Scrappy Ribbed Wonder Socks. This is my own sock pattern, and they're just ribbed and lovely. Anyways, I'll be going over the math very quickly for you, just so you understand how German short rows work for toe shaping. So I'm just going to draw a little picture so you understand what we will be doing. So we're gonna cast on all of our stitches with some waste yarn. Then with our color of yarn, we're going to knit like this. And we're going to have stitch markers . 2 stitch markers, one here and one here, okay? Then we're going to knit another triangle, and you're going to have your stitch markers. So you're going to cast on, you're going to knit, 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 and then we're going to go and reverse it. And that's how you're going to get this rounded toe shape. So obviously these sides would be connected. You'll understand in a minute. So I'm just going to grab my sample here. So we're going to cast on with waste yarn on one side of the sock. We're going to knit up to the middle. So knit up to the middle. Then we're going to go from the middle and knit down. At the end, you're going to unpick your waste yarn, and then you will be able to begin knitting in the round. So for German short rows, you need to divide your stitches by 3. So if you have a 64 stitch sock, you're going to want to divide it into 3s. It doesn't have to be even per se, but these 2 sides here between the stitch markers need to be even. So for 64 stitches, I would probably do, you're going to have 64 stitches, and you're going to divide that by 2 because you will be working with half of the stitches. So this will give me 32. So I could do 10, 12, and 10. That means there's 10 stitches, then I have a stitch marker, then I'll have 12, then I have 10 stitches again. 10 stitches, stitch marker, 12 stitches, stitch marker, 10 stitches. You could also switch it up. I want to say 11 and 11, 22, so that should leave you with 10, right? 10, 20, 32. Yeah, so you could do this arrangement as well. If you have 72 stitches, you're going to want to divide your total number of stitches in half. So divide this by 2. And this will give you 36. And then if I were to have 36, you could do 14, 8, and 14. You could do 10. Leave me 13 and 13. For my example, I'll probably only be casting on 20 stitches, which will be half. So the way I'm going to divide my stitches will be it's gonna be a little short. I could do 5, 10, and 5. Seems a little short though. I think I'll do 5, 10, and 5. However, depending on how many stitches you keep in the middle here versus the sides will also depend on the shape that you're going for. So the more stitches you leave in the center, the shorter, more rounded look you're gonna get. And the more stitches that you leave wrapped, it's gonna give you more of a classic wedge toe look. So it's gonna make your toe longer, or if you're doing this for a heel, it'll make your heel much longer and much more square shaped. So, like I said, I'm going to be casting on 20 stitches. And for this tutorial, you're going to need 2 stitch markers, waste yarn, main color of yarn, your needles. So if you're knitting socks, grab your sock yarn, grab your sock needles. I'm going to be casting on with worsted weight yarn and some 5mm needles, just so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm also going to grab out some little scissors here to be able to cut the yarn. So I'm just quickly going to cast 20 stitches onto my needle here, and I'm going to use this blue yarn because I know it'll show up really well on camera. Actually, I'm going to grab a crochet hook. 1 minute. Okay, so I did grab a crochet hook. I grabbed a 5mm crochet hook, and the reason for that is because I will be doing a provisional cast on. However, I've done this many ways. Sometimes I just knit with waste yarn, and then I will cast on with my main color of yarn. I've done it with the crocheted cast on and unpicked the cast on. You can do a provisional cast on like I am doing with a crochet hook, so where you're just going to make a chain. So if you're going to make a chain like me, make sure you make your chain slightly longer than the number of stitches you will need. And then I'm just going to cut the yarn. And just going to pull through first. There we go. So I just did a little slip stitch at the end so my yarn cannot fall out on me. Now I'm grabbing my main color of yarn here. I'm just going to pull out a bunch from the little cake here, and you are going to pick up the stitches. So I need to pick up 20 stitches. However, if you are knitting a 64 stitch sock, you want to be picking up 32. If you're knitting 72 stitches in total, you want to be picking up 36. Again, you want to pick up half of the stitches or cast on half of your stitches. Okay. Now I've cast on all of my stitches, I think, so I'm just going to give them a quick count and double check that I have the right number of stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. What? Okay, so I picked up one stitch too many, so I'll just drop the last one off my needle and try that again. 5. Okay, so I have 20 stitches cast on. For this first round here, I am just going to knit, and I'll be placing my markers. So for me, I'm going to knit 5 stitches here. However, depending on how you decide to divide your stitches, will depend on where you're going to place your marker. So again, if you're knitting 64 stitches, I would suggest knitting 10 stitches and then placing a marker. If you're knitting 72, I would suggest knitting 14 and then placing a marker. So now I've knit 10 stitches, and I'm going to place my other marker here. And now I will knit my last 5 stitches. Okay. Now, before I go any further, I'm just going to set my knitting down for a minute. So this is what I have, okay? So I have my waste yarn here that I did from my Provisional Cast On, and I have knit the first round. I have 5 stitches on both sides. You want to make sure that your outside stitches match in number, and you want to make sure that you have cast on the correct amount of stitches. You want to make sure you have half the stitches on your needle. This is very important because if not, you're going to knit a toe and it's going to be the wrong size by the time you go to knit in the rounds. You want to make sure that half of your stitches are cast on and that your side stitches match and they're even in number. Doesn't matter how many you have per se, but they have to be the same number. So you want to have like 10 and 10 or 11 and 11, 6 and 6, 5 and 5. Doesn't matter, you just want the numbers to match, okay? So for the next row, I'm just going to purl, and I'm just going to slip the stitches as I come, slip the markers as I come to them. So I'm going to slip the first stitch purl-wise with yarn in front, and then I'll just purl across to the first marker. Now I'm going to slip my marker, and now I'm going to purl across. I've come to my second marker, so I'll slip my marker, and I'm just going to purl across. I like to work the first 2 rows so that I start on a knit side. However, not everybody does when they knit their German short rows. This is just how I knit mine. Okay, so we've now worked a knit side and we've worked a purl side. Just slip markers when you came to them. So we're going to make our first German short row. So what we're going to do is we're going to slip the first stitch on the needle purlwise with yarn in back. You're going to bring it up, up between the needles, okay? I'm gonna give it a tug. You see how it looks like I've made 2 stitches here? Because of how the yarn wraps around the needle. Now I'm just going to knit across. And I'm gonna slip my marker as I come to it for the middle here. I'm gonna knit across the middle stitches here. Now I'm going to knit to the end of my needle, okay? So every time you work a German short row, you're only going to be making one of these little double stitches. So here's what it looks like so far. I hope so far everything's making sense. Now we're on the purl side, okay? I'm just going to pull out some more yarn before I continue. So I'm on the purl side. You are going to slip this stitch purlwise with yarn in front. You are now going to take your yarn, wrap it so it's in the front, around, and then in between your needles to make your double stitch, okay? You can see that right there. That's your German short row. Now we're going to purl across to that first marker, slip your marker, purl across to that second marker, slip your second marker. Now we're going to purl, but don't touch this, don't touch your double stitch or your German short row, okay? So I'm not going to do anything with this this wrapped stitch here. So this was my first German short row. I'm not going to do anything with it, okay? I'm just going to turn my work and leave this one unworked. Now I'm going to slip this stitch purlwise, the first one on my left hand needle, and I'm going to make another German short row. So again, my yarn's in the back and I slipped purlwise. I'm bringing the yarn between the needles and I'm going to give it a quick little tug to tighten that up. Now I'm going to knit. I'm going to slip my marker and I'm going to put my knitting down in 1 second. I'm just going to secure my marker in place. So every time, so I've only made one German short row on this side, so every time we're just going to knit across to one stitch before the short row. We're going to turn the work, make your short row, and you're going to keep going. Then you're going to purl across to the next stitch before your short row. So we have 2 on this side, so the next side I'm going to purl across to this one, then I'm going to make a short row. And you're going to keep going, knitting and purling, making your short rows till all the stitches on the outside here have been worked, okay? So I'm going to work them all with you. I only have 5 on each side. However, obviously if you have cast on more stitches than me, you're going to have more short rows to work. And once you get into it, you can kind of just get into the flow, and they actually go pretty quickly and they're pretty fun to make, I think. I'm gonna slip my marker. Okay, so I have this stitch here, so I want to knit to 1 stitch before, just like this. Now I'm not going to work this short row, I'm going to leave it alone. I like to turn the work. Now I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with yarn in front, up and between the needles, so I'm ready to purl again, okay? Let's show you one more time. So I slipped this stitch purlwise with yarn in front, I'm going to bring it over top of the right hand needle and between. Now I'm going to purl to the first marker. And I'm going to slip my first marker, and now I'm going to purl to the second marker. Oops. Okay, now I'm at my second marker, so I'm just going to slip that one. And now I have 2 short rows here, so I'm going to work to 1 stitch before the short row. So I have my 2 short rows and I have 1 regular stitch. I'm going to work my regular stitch and I'm going to leave the 2 alone. Now I'm just going to turn my work. So I'm on the knit side again. I have 2 short rows on this side and I should have 2 on this side. So every time you begin the knit row, you should be making another new short row. However, before you start, they should be equal. They should match on both sides for how many short rows you have already worked. So again, I'm going to slip this stitch purlwise with yarn in the back, and I'm going to bring the yarn from the back over top of the needles in between, and I'm going to give that stitch a little tug. Now I'm going to knit to the first marker, slip the marker. Now we're just going to knit across the middle here to second marker. Slipping my marker, and now I'm going to knit to 1 stitch before my short row. So I have 2 short rows on this side, then I have 1 regular stitch. I'm going to knit the regular stitch, and I'm not going to touch those short rows. Now you're going to turn the work with yarn in front, slip purlwise, and then oops, back and through. Okay, give it a tug, purl to your first marker. Oops, I dropped my stitch there. Slip the marker. Now I'm going to purl across. Slip the marker. And then I have my 3 short rows on this side, so I'm not going to work those. I'm just going to turn my work. Now I have 3, and I have 1, 2, 3 short rows on the side as well. This is what it looks like. I'm going to pull my needles out so you kind of see the shaping that's happening. So you can see, obviously, I'm going to have a very sort of like squatty short toe since there's so many stitches in the middle here compared to my sides, but that's okay because this is for demonstration purposes only. Okay, so I'm just going to push my needles back in, and then we will be ready to begin our next short row. So slip purlwise, yarn in front because we're on the knit side. Give that, oops, caught here, piece of yarn a tug, knit to first marker, slip marker. Knit across to second marker. Slip that marker. Now I'm going to knit to 1 stitch before the short rows. So I have 3 on this side, so I'm not going to touch any of those. I'm just going to turn my work. Now I'm going to slip the stitch purlwise with the yarn in the front. Give that a tug, purl across to stitch marker, slip the marker, purl across to second stitch marker there. Slip your marker, purl to right before the short rows, turn the work. Now I have 4 short rows on this side, I have 4 on the other side, so I have 1 more over here to make, and I'm going to make my last one right here. I'm just going to slip my marker, and I'm just going to knit across. Now I'm going to knit the last stitch. I have 4 short rows here, so I'm just going to turn the work and leave those alone. Now I'm going to make my short row, and I'm going to purl. Now I'm going to stop right here for 1 minute, because I just want to show you that I worked all the short rows on this side, and I've worked all the short rows on this side. So when this happens, the next thing you're going to do is kind of fun. So what I'm doing is I'm going to purl across to that second marker. Now this only happens after you have worked all of your short rows, okay? So I have no more stitches on this side to work for short rows, and I have no more stitches on this side to work for short rows. So I'm going to slip my marker. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to purl mine through the back leg, because that's going to be, ooh, maybe not, front leg. I'm going to purl if I can get into these stitches. So I have 2 loops per stitch. I'm going to treat them as if they are 1 stitch. Here we go. I'm going to purl mine through the back leg. I'm going to purl all of them, and I'm going to treat both loops as if it were 1 stitch. And you want to make sure you're grabbing both loops, because if you do not, you are going to have this weird hole in your sock, and it's not going to look right. There we go. So I'm just going to turn this around and show you. So here's what we have. That's what it looks like when they're all worked. And then on the other side I have all these double stitches, or short rows I still have to work. So now I'm going to just slip this first stitch purlwise with yarn in back. Now I'm just going to knit to the marker, slip the marker, and I'll knit to the second marker. What am I going on about? Now you're going to go into each stitch. You're just going to knit those double stitches, or those short rows, as if they were 1 stitch. So I'm just knitting both loops together. And I'm just going to pop this onto the cord so you can see exactly what I have. So you can see how I have this beautiful rounded look going on. Here's what it looks like for where I did my purls. The middle here, and this is where I did the knits. I think it looks pretty good so far. Okay, so we're at about the halfway point. So now I'm going to slip first stitch purlwise with yarn in front, and I'm just going to purl across to the first marker, slip my first marker. Now I'm going to purl across to the second marker, slip this marker. Oops, actually I'm going to remove this marker. I don't need it anymore. So I've just purled 5, slip marker, purled 10, and I did have the marker here. However, I'm going to remove the second marker. You'll understand why in just a second. So I'm going to purl my first stitch, and that's it. I'm only going to purl 1 stitch. Now I'm going to slip this stitch knitwise. I'm going to make a short row. Now I'm going to knit across to my marker because I only have 1 at this point. Now I'm going to remove my other marker, so I have no markers. I'm going to knit just 1 stitch. Just like I did on the other side, just 1. Now we're going to turn the work. Slip first stitch purlwise, yarn in front, make a short row. Now I'm going to purl across. And I'm just going to put my knitting down for just a second, just so you can see what's going on. Okay, so I have 1 short row right here. This is my short row. I have these stitches unworked. And then from here to here, this is my middle. And then I have 1 short row here. These are unworked. What I'm going to do is I'm going to finish purling across. So across these stitches here, and I have my short row. I'm going to purl my short row. Then we're going to purl 1 more stitch. So I'm just going to get my yarn and needles back in position. So again, purl across to your short row. Come on. Alright, now I'm going to purl. So I purled my short row. Now I'm going to purl 1 more stitch, and I'm going to turn the work. Now I'm going to slip this stitch knitwise. No, slip this stitch purlwise. What am I going on about? Wrap the yarn, give it a tug to make a short row. Knitting across to my short row on the left hand needle. Alright, knitting the short row, knit 1 more stitch, turn the work. Slip first stitch purlwise with yarn in front, make a short row, purl across to first short row on the left hand needle. Okay, reach the short row, so I'm going to purl this short row just like I did before. Purl 1 more stitch, turn your work. Slip first stitch purlwise with yarn in back, make your short row, knit to the short row on the left hand needle. knit your short row, knit one more stitch, turn the work. Here's what I got so far. Here's where my short rows were. And here they are on the left side. So on the purl side, I have a little bit of a harder time getting back into my short rows, so some of them are not as clean as they are on the knit side. However, that's tension and just how I actually got into the stitch, because some of them I did go through the back leg, so it does give it a little bit of a different look here. Anyways, I'm just going to pull out some more yarn and then we'll keep going. So I'm going to purl the first stitch here. Okay, let's try this again. I will be slipping the first stitch purlwise, making my short row. And I'm going to purl across till I reach the short row on the left hand needle. Alright, here's my short row. I'm going to purl that. I want to make sure I grab both loops together. Purl it, purl one more stitch, turn the work. Slip my stitch purlwise, make a short row, and I'm going to knit till I reach the short row on the left hand needle. Knitting my short row, knit one more stitch, and now, oops, don't drop that one. Now I'm just going to turn my work. So I have one stitch left here to make a short row, and I have one stitch here to make a short row. So again, this is the purl side, not as nice, but that's okay. And here's my knit side, so beautiful. Again, it's just a tension thing. I can always fix it up at the end if I really want. Anyways, turning my work. Slipping first stitch purlwise with yarn in front, make your short row. Purl across to the first short row on your left hand needle. Okay, so I've reached my short row. I'm going to purl that. If I can get into that second loop there, come on. Here we go. And purling, and then I'm going to purl my last stitch here. Alright. I'm going to slip first stitch purlwise, and I'm going to make a short row. Now I'm going to knit across, knit this one, and I'm going to knit my last stitch here. I'm gonna pull out some more yarn. Okay, so this was the last stitch on the left hand needle here. I have one short row on this side. What I'm gonna do is turn the work. Slip the first stitch purlwise with yarn in front, make a short row, purl across to the last short row, going to purl my last short row. Okay, purl the last short row, and I got both the loops in there. I'm just going to pull this onto the cord so you can see. So this side gets a little messy on me, but that's okay. We can fix this after. So here's what I have. And I have one short row left on this side. Leave this alone. Do not do anything with this yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab an extra set of needles. If you're knitting this magic loop, if you're knitting this short circulars, if you're knitting on DPNs, I would highly, highly, highly suggest that what you're going to do is you're going to grab the right leg of each stitch here, and you're going to make sure you're going to pick up the same number of stitches as you cast on. Sometimes you may lose a stitch right here because there's like a little bit of a partial stitch if you did the provisional cast on like I did. If that happens, just pick up a loop. You can pick it up from the side here, make a stitch. You need to have the same number of stitches picked up as what you cast on, okay? So I'm just going to go grab a set of needles, and I'm going to pick up my stitches, and I'm going to show you what I mean. Okay, so I just grabbed a second set of circular needles. These are slightly smaller than the needles I knit the heel with. However, this is only for demonstration purposes only, so I'm not too concerned about it. So I'm going to start on this side here, and I'm just going to go into the stitches, and I'm going to pick up 20. 1, 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, so I've picked up 20 stitches. I'm going to put these onto the cord. I'm just going to grab my scissors here. I'm going to cut this waist yarn to make it a little easier for me. And then I'm going to begin unpicking this waist yarn if I can. The yarn I chose is a wool yarn, and it's a little bit hairy, so I might have a little bit of issues unpicking this. So I'm going to grab a tapestry needle, and I'm going to carefully attempt to unthread the yarn. Oh, come on. Why will you not? Unthread. So easy. But yeah, I picked up all my stitches here, so I'm just going to unthread my yarn here. There we go. Did I finally get it? Ah, so close and so far. Struggle's real with this. Anyways, that's all there is to this. So I'll just potentially cut some of this out so you don't have to watch me struggle to unthread the yarn. Because it's really sticking to these stitches here. Alright, so I've picked up all of my stitches here. Oops, that's my little tail yarn, wrong side. And then I have my working yarn coming off my back needle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold up my heel, my little toe in half here. Just going to adjust that so you can see what I got. Here we are. I unpicked all my waste yarn. I didn't finish recording the end of that because I don't know about you, but I was very much struggling with that and I was just cutting it out. So here's what I have. Here's what I have. And here's my working yarn. Ooh. Okay, so if you're like me and your working yarn ends up on the purl side, I'm going to work one more. Oh no, my yarn's on the knit side. What am I talking about? Sorry, I'm having a moment. Okay, so my yarn's here because it's not in the prime position for me. I'm just going to slip my first stitch and I'm going to knit across till I get to the back, and then if need be I will just pick up an extra stitch at the end there to avoid any holes in my little toe here. I'm gonna knit my last short row that I have here. Now I'm going to go to my back needle and I'm going to tuck that little tail end in so it's not distracting you or me. And I'm just going to begin knitting like normal so you can just start knitting in the round. Some of my stitches look a little twisted here, so I'm just going to knit them however I place them on the needle. Alrighty, here we are. And then you would just pull this needle out, and I would just keep working in the round like this. So I'll knit a few more stitches. I'll knit across this needle again for you just so you can see how it's going to look. Pull this needle out. Alrighty, so here's what I have. If yours is a little bit loose, I'll just show you a quick little trick on what to do. I personally like this look a little bit more than this one. I feel like this right here is a little messy. So on the inside here, you can see that I have these seams. So what I would do is I would just grab some yarn. Just gonna pull on all of them. I'm not gonna do it just yet because I just want to make sure that I'm going to be seaming the right stitches together. Right in here. This looks really loose. I just pulled on them from the inside and they look great. However, if you want to secure them, I just grab a tapestry needle and just secure these loops, or you can grab a crochet hook and grab onto these and just like slip stitch them together. It's totally up to you. However, this one's just a sample, so I'm not bothered by it. So yeah, here's my short row toe, and then if you for some reason have like big gaping holes on the side when you go to join in the round, just pick up one leg of a stitch from the left side, one leg of the stitch to the right side, and just add an extra stitch, and then on the next round just do a decrease so you don't have a hole. So what I mean is just go like this, pick up one leg from this side and one leg from this side, and knit these two legs together to make a stitch, and then you're going to decrease it on the next round with a stitch from the left needle or the right needle, doesn't matter, whatever needle you put your extra stitch on, and that will eliminate any holes you'll have when you go to join in the round. And here's my very short squatty little toe. Obviously with German short rows you can choose which shape you want, so if you want your toe to be a little bit longer and a little bit more rounded, I would just go for less stitches in the middle and add like a couple more doubles German short rows on the sides here. Anyways, this is the finished look, and here it is done in sock yarn. Here's the finished look, and here's what the sides look like. So again, if you enjoyed this tutorial, feel free to leave me a comment. If you didn't enjoy the tutorial, let me know. So yeah, here's how I knit my German short rows. Thanks for watching.